Um, so let me say continue. I had a recording notification. So today I'm going to talk about my work on applying cultural evolution theory to health-related behaviors in hunter-gatherers and in other societies. So let me start by explaining what cultural evolution is. Cultural evolution is a field of research that suggests that cultural traits, so these can be ideas, skills, artifacts, and etc. So cultural traits, like the biological ones, are transmitted from person to person. They exhibit variation and they're subject to selection. One aspect of cultural evolution research is that we can study cultural traits quantitatively. And a hallmark of human evolution is that our culture is cumulative. So what that means is that our knowledge and skills accumulate over time, over generations, and increase in diversity and complexity. So cultural evolution deals with understanding how information is transmitted from one person to another by social learning processes. And eventually it deals with understanding how these individual level decisions, individual level social learning processes um, result in population level cultural patterns. It also deals with understanding what information is more likely to be copied and more likely to persist in population. And the theory predicts that we have some biases. For example, we have some biases in our social learning. We just don't learn randomly from any person, but we choose to learn from, for example, prestigious individuals because it may be more beneficial for us because prestige often is associated with skills and knowledge. And in relatively stable environments, it also pays off evolutionarily to learn or to copy what the majority does instead of trying to learn individually by trial and error. So this is something called conformist bias. And then we have also some cognitive biases that makes a certain kind of information more attractive than others. For example, some studies have found that people remember and transmit information that's about social relationships more accurately than non-social information. And likewise, we generally find it more easier to understand information if it's in line with our intuitions. Um, so in this talk, I will argue that we can apply these predictions and methodologies from cultural evolution theory to understand how health-related behavioral patterns emerge in populations. And to illustrate that, I will first start with my research on BaYaka hunter-gatherers in Congo, and then I will talk about how the BaYaka accumulate such diverse medicinal plant knowledge repertoire. And then I will talk about how the BaYaka change in their plant knowledge over time and how their treatment preferences also change over time with the invention of new cultural practices, new cultural treatment practices. And then in the final part of my talk, I'm going to be talking about application of cultural evolution theory to vaccine hesitancy, which is my ongoing work. So since 2013, I have been doing fieldwork in Congo, Brazzaville, studying Imbangele hunter-gatherers. They're also called BaYaka pygmies, and they are one of the many pygmy groups living across the Central Africa in the Congo Basin. So here in this photo, you see a BaYaka camp that we visited in 2014. And you can see that traditionally BaYaka live in these huts that are made of leaves, and multiple families come together, and this is called a campsite. And usually a campsite varies between 10 to 60 individuals, and people move between different campsites, and they also change their camp location depending on the food resources. And we call the BaYaka hunter-gatherers because their main subsistence is from hunting wild meat and gathering wild products. Here you see people, hunters coming back from their hunting trip. Usually they happen at night. And then the meat is traditionally shared between all the members in the community. There is an extensive food sharing. But the BaYaka also trade with their agricultural farmer neighbors. So here you see BaYaka women gathering forest plants to sell that to the neighboring farmers in exchange of some agricultural products and cigarettes, and also in exchange of alcohol. So since I started doing fieldwork and living with BaYaka, I was very interested in understanding how they have accumulated such diverse repertoire of plant knowledge. So here you see Semoi and her family on a foraging trip, and they were collecting wild peanuts. But I also knew that they don't only go to forest for food, but also for medicine. So here in this photo, you see different types of plant uses. There's very much diversity on how plants are used as well. For example, one use type is putting grated barks of a tree into a cone-shaped leaf, and then they use it as eye or ear drops. And there are other methods of preparing medicinal plants. For example, they often boil the bark of different trees and use it mostly for digestive system disorders. Here, a mother is preparing a treatment for her sick child. He has been suffering from some respiratory system disorder, and they told me, my informants told me that it works as Vicks. So there are so many different treatment methods. So initially, for example, in one camp, I interviewed 15 people, and they told me over 80 different plants and over 200 different uses. So one of my research questions then has been how forest hunter-gatherers accumulate such diverse medicinal plant knowledge and uses. So to investigate that, what I wanted to understand is how people share this information, and whether this information sharing patterns can help us understand how this knowledge is accumulated. So I asked over 200 BaYaka in 4 different campsites. So these camps, some of them are located in the forest, as you saw in the previous photo, but there was one camp which was located more close to a farmer town, which I'm going to be talking about later in my presentation. So in those 4 different BaYaka camps, I asked people about 33 different plants. So I asked them if they knew the plant, and if they knew it, if they use it, what do they use it for? And then I looked at the sharing of knowledge. So first, let me talk about the plant uses. So majority of those plant uses, for the 33 plants that I asked, concerned medicinal purposes. but there were other uses as well. So some plants were used for foraging as poison. So there was, for example, one plant that they used the fruits as to poison fish in the river. And then there are some plants that are used for social beliefs. For example, there was one plant that majority of people told me that they use it to detect cheaters in the community. So if someone is accused of cheating their partner, then they would give this plant mix to the person, and then if the person drinks the mixture and gets poisoned, then he was found to be guilty. Whereas if he vomits and doesn't get poisoned, then he is believed to be innocent. So there are different uses. But I was in this talk, I'm just going to talk about how medicinal plant knowledge is shared among different people. So to understand the sharing patterns, what I did is I looked at the similarity of plant uses between two individuals. So if you and I use the same plant for the same purpose, then I coded that as we shared that knowledge. Whereas if we use the same plant for different purposes, then I coded that we didn't share that knowledge. And I looked at what factors predicted the probability of two people using the same plant for the same reasons. And what we found is that medicinal plant uses were mostly shared within families, unlike some other uses where we found that they were mostly shared between individuals in the same camp. So this was expected in the sense that you would expect mothers and children, fathers and children and siblings share a lot of medicinal plant uses. What was more interesting to me was that spouses had very high probability of sharing the knowledge on how to use plants, more so than mother and child pair. So here in this plot, you're seeing odds ratios for different predictors. So this odds ratios shows the odds of two individuals sharing plant knowledge, so using the same plant for the same purpose. And an odds ratio above 1 means that that particular factor increases this probability. So I'm telling this because I'm going to be talking about odds ratios in some other research as well. So as you can see here, the largest odds was between spouses. So spouses shared a lot of knowledge, and mothers and children, of course. But interestingly, not only spouses, but spouses' primary kin and distant kin as well. So you shared medicinal plant knowledge with your in-laws as well. So based on these results, we suggested that marital ties have been really important in understanding how hunter-gatherers, forest hunter-gatherers accumulate medicinal plant knowledge. So this is the mechanism we suggest that's happening, that you first get to learn about how to use medicinal plants when you're growing up from your parents. And then there is rule of exogamy in this community and in many other hunter-gatherer communities, that you can't marry within your same clan, so you have to marry outside. And that's actually contributes to the diversity of knowledge, because your spouse also inherits that specialized knowledge from their family. And then when you partner up, then you have the chance to combine this knowledge from different families. So recent experimental work also reinforced or empirical findings in hunter-gatherers that this small world network structure, or like partial connectedness. So here, for example, you see a network structure of a BaYaka campsite where red ties are family ties and the blue ties are unrelated individuals. So this is a small world network because you have very tight connections between the family members, and then more loose connections between unrelated individuals. And this kind of partially connected network structure has been shown both in hunter-gatherers and also through experimental work to increase the diversity of cultural traits in human populations. Okay, so this was the first part of my talk. And going on to the second part, I have also been interested in understanding transitions in hunter-gatherer societies and how these transitions affect cultural patterns. So what I mean by transitions is that as you can see from the photos, this is a photo from a campsite we visited in 2014, which was located in the forest. But some BaYaka prefer living closer to farmer villages and farmer towns, and they make larger villages, like over 100 people, and then they usually live in these more sedentary houses made of timber. So there are some transitions and variation in market integration in BaYaka groups. So I wanted to understand whether people who are born in town camps, we call, have different plant knowledge than people who are born and raised in the forest camps. And we also wanted to understand whether treatment preferences, whether preference for traditional treatment changes when the BaYaka are born in the town. So in 2018, some UCL students, a colleague, and a medical doctor friend, we went to Congo again. And then we wanted to look at the effects of these transitions on treatment preferences, and also we gathered some additional data on the BaYaka health and diet, which is a separate project that we wanted to see how the transitions affect dietary patterns and health as well. So I first looked at plant knowledge and use in town-born BaYaka versus forest-born BaYaka. And here you can see the knowledge scores and plant use scores. So as I said, I asked people about 33 different plants. And then these are the mean plant knowledge scores. So how many of these 33 plants people knew in different campsites. So Pokola is the camp which is located in the town, and as you can see, both for knowledge score and use score, the BaYaka who were born and raised in town had lower plant knowledge and use compared to the BaYaka who were born in forest camps. And I also looked at whether the use types differed among the BaYaka who were born in town and who were born in forest. So for that, I looked at percentage of participants using different plants for different reasons. So here you see percentage of participants in different campsites using plants for digestive system disorders. So for example, this forest camp, 20% of the participants used any plant for digestive system disorders, whereas you can see that people who were born in town, this person just declined. So what this suggests is that this decline in plant knowledge concerns medicinal plant users. So their repertoire of medicinal plant users are declining. And then I wanted to understand why this is happening. And what we found is that one thing that I need to tell is that in the logging town that I showed a photo of, there is a hospital that is run by the logging company, and they offer free treatment to hunter-gatherers as well. So in 2018, we asked BaYaka, we went back to the same camps that we collected the plant knowledge data, and we asked participants about their treatment preferences. So we asked them whether you prefer going to hospital or you prefer using traditional treatment methods like using plants. And then what we found is that people who were born in town, majority said that they prefer going to hospital. And only a few said that TM means here is traditional medicine. Only a few said that they prefer traditional medicine, whereas in forest camps, the majority said they prefer traditional medicine after and then hospital. And some said that they use traditional medicine first, and if it doesn't work, they try to go to hospital. But this doesn't mean that it's fixed, because there are certain diseases that all the BaYaka, regardless of where they're residing or where they were born, they said they prefer traditional medicine. For example, there is a condition the BaYaka referred to as cholé, and it's associated with someone having a swollen limb and increased temperature, and it's a very rapidly developing disease. And then the BaYaka believe that this is caused by an invisible creature, and if someone uncautiously steps on this invisible creature, which can be an invisible bird that comes from sky after rainbow, then they catch this this illness. And both in 2014 and 18, I have come across young boys with this illness, and we have offered people to take the person to the hospital, but each time they told us that no, if you take them to hospital, they're gonna die. So instead, the healer here, you can see the healer is preparing medicine for the sick boy. It was in 2018. So I would like to further investigate what determines the cultural fitness of certain health beliefs. So why certain health beliefs persist more in populations compared to others. In this case, I believe that if in the past they took the person to hospital and then the person died at the hospital, then perhaps it kind of reinforced that belief that the hospital doesn't work for this particular disease, but we don't know yet. Okay, so I don't know how much time I have, but this question of what determines the cultural fitness of certain health beliefs brings us to the last part of my talk, which is about vaccination beliefs. So there is a variation in what people believe in the safety and effectiveness of vaccinations. And over the recent years, we have been observing that vaccine hesitancy.
One such health-related behavioral pattern is vaccine hesitancy.
I had a voiceover for that for that slide. Anyway, I will talk to you about it now. So we have been observing an increase in vaccine hesitancy. Vaccine hesitancy is this phenomena that that refers to delay in acceptance or refusal of vaccinations. And actually in 2019, WHO listed vaccine hesitancy as one of the top 10 global threats to human health, because especially in Western countries, it's on the rise. And when you look at 2019 measles surveillance data of WHO, you see that in the European region, the case of measles have increased 3 times, and people think that this is because of many more people are refusing to vaccinate their children. So the question then is why we are observing this increase in vaccine hesitancy. And one study in 2018 looking at vaccine hesitancy across 24 different countries has shown that the largest correlates of vaccine hesitancy is conspiratorial worldviews. So what that suggests is that if a person believed in conspiracy theories, then they were more likely to hold anti-vaccination ideas. So I have been interested in vaccine hesitancy myself, and so I'm from Turkey, and at the beginning of this pandemic, I was in Turkey, and there were so many rumors about the origin of the novel coronavirus. And I wanted to do a study, I wanted to do a study on like behavioral responses of the pandemic, comparing in Turkey and in the UK. And then I collaborated with a social psychologist. He's called Mete Sefa Üsal from 9 Eylül University. And we conducted a survey looking at anxiety response in UK and Turkey during the first lockdown. And then because also there were lots of rumors about the origin of the coronavirus, we wanted to add these questions on. We were interested in understanding what people believed about the origin of the virus and their willingness to vaccinate for a potential COVID-19 vaccine as well. And of course, we had several demographic and behavioral factors too. So what we found is that there was a very strong effect of vaccination acceptance for potential COVID-19 vaccine and virus origin beliefs. So if people believed in the natural origin of the virus, so if they believed that the virus originated in wildlife, then they were more likely to accept a potential COVID-19 vaccination. So here you see blue bars showing results in Turkey and then orange bars showing participants from the UK. And you see the proportion of people accepting a potential COVID-19 vaccination. And you see that among people who believed in the natural origin, the proportion is quite high. Whereas when you look at people who believe in the artificial origin, only 48% in Turkey were willing to vaccinate for COVID-19 vaccine, and then only 69% in UK. And as you can see, overall, there was vaccine hesitancy is higher in Turkey. So here, where odds ratios come again. So these are odds of COVID-19 vaccine acceptance. And as I said, an odds ratio larger than 1 suggests that that particular factor is increasing the odds of, in this case, vaccine acceptance. And as I said, the largest predictor for explaining vaccine acceptance was the belief on the natural origin of the coronavirus in both countries. And then interestingly, the second largest predictor was the COVID-19 related anxiety score. So we asked participants a bunch of questions on how anxious they are about passing the coronavirus on to others, getting the coronavirus, or leaving their houses. And people who scored higher on this anxiety level were more willing to accept a COVID-19 vaccination, which is kind of going in line with this evolutionary theories on the function of anxiety. And then in both countries, men were more likely to accept vaccinations compared to women, especially in Turkey. This effect was significant. And there were other factors which had significant effects, but the effect sizes were not that great. Interestingly, in Turkey, people who had undergraduate degrees were less likely to accept COVID-19 vaccination compared to people who didn't have an undergraduate degree. So education had a reverse effect, and financial satisfaction increased also vaccine acceptance. Okay, and as I said, interestingly, there were quite big country-level differences. So vaccine acceptance rates were much higher in the UK. There were much more vaccine hesitant people in Turkey, so 31% compared to 14% in the UK. And similarly, there were fewer people in Turkey. The proportion of participants who believed in the natural origin of the virus was lower. So this suggests that conspiratorial views are higher among Turkish participants. Okay, so this made us want to do more research understanding vaccine hesitancy in Turkey, because it was quite concerning levels what we found. And then we were lucky to get funding from UCL, Global Challenges Research Fund. This happened very recently. So now we are working on understanding further what determines vaccine hesitancy in Turkey. And as you can see, for example, from the recent literature, the number of families signing a vaccine rejection form has increased from 183 in 2011 to 23,000 in 2017. So there are two main aspects of this ongoing research that we're interested in doing, and one is outgroup mistrust and conspiracy beliefs. So when you look at a conspiracy theory, at its core, it's often, so conspiracy theories often attribute unseen causes of important events to a powerful coalition, and they think that this powerful coalition is secretly working to cause harm. So at the core of conspiracy theories, there is mistrust in outgroups. So we want to see whether variation in outgroup mistrust in different populations are contributing to the variation in the level of conspiracy beliefs across different populations. And then bringing in cultural evolution theory as well, we also are interested in cognitive biases that are contributing to conspiracy beliefs and anti-vaccination attitudes. So there is really inspiring literature already on that. One aspect of conspiracy beliefs is that people found that belief in conspiracy theories is associated with a general rejection of science. So it's really a question about why people reject science in the first place. And as I said, really inspiring publications already done on this, applying cultural evolution theory. So one suggestion is that scientific explanations often are not intuitive, so they have more difficulty in being copied and spread within populations. Then we have intuitive sense of disgust, which may be contributing to vaccine hesitancy. And another inspirational article from Hasselton and Netzel, looking at evolutionary perspectives on cognitive biases and applying error management theory, which simply suggests that under uncertainty, their evolution should favor biases towards making least costly decisions. So because these especially COVID vaccines, they are new, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So people may then choose not to take any action than going ahead and taking an action and getting vaccinated, which is also called omission bias in literature. So now we're looking at incorporating these theories and then we are conducting qualitative interviews with vaccine hesitant people in Turkey. And then we also would like to check design experiments on effectiveness of pro-vaccination messages to look at content biases and the variation of the information source. So what kind of information source people find more trusting. And then also inspired from cultural evolutionary theory, what kind of public health messaging may be more successful comparing others, and how we can co-create public health messaging by collaborating with study participants as well. So this is an ongoing project, and if you're already working on these questions, we are interested in collaborations, especially in other countries. This project is mostly based in Turkey, so feel free to get in touch. And that's it for me. I don't know how long. I felt like this has been a long talk. I hope you enjoyed it. And I want to thank all the BaYaka participants and all participants in Turkey and the UK and my collaborators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very, very interesting talk. So if you could stop sharing your screen, and then we'll go into the question and answers session.
Sure.
Okay. So we have some questions already, so I'll read them out, but if you also keep an eye on the chat, just in case my internet decides to play up. So we have a question from Mary. Medicinal knowledge sharing between mother and children would be biased regarding age of children, especially very young children.
That's a very good question. That's something I should have mentioned in my talk, which I've forgotten, that it was on all adult participants. So when I said mother and children, of course we thought about young children, but they're already like, say, adult person and their elderly mother. And it's a very good question because there is, of course, as you would expect, plant knowledge increases by age. Like children don't know as many plants as adults, and the elderly know of most. So yeah, it was based on adults.
Okay, so we have a few people with their hands up. So if we go to Joe Stubbersfield.
Hey, that was a really great talk. Thanks very much. It's really interesting to see this kind of things applying. I think this question is probably a few months early, but I was wondering if you had any kind of intuitions about the relative influence of the kind of model-based biases you were talking about and the kind of content, more cognitive-based biases. Do you have any intuitions about what might be more influential on the vaccine hesitancy messages, or maybe more successful in terms of interventions or messaging? Do you have any ideas on that at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And by the way, I really like your work.
Thanks very much.
I should say. Yeah, so that's actually one of the reasons why we want to do this experimental work, to look at like how different contents of vaccination messages affect people's, whether they would be more willing to accept vaccinations or not. And then in terms of more like social learning biases, I think that may even be more important when when people are talking about behavior change. Like my colleagues and I at UCL have recently published a paper like how evolutionary theory can help us in pandemics, and there we suggested that you can use conformist bias learning when doing vaccine promotion messaging, because people trust more their in-group members, and they're more likely to copy what their in-group members are doing. So if you can find peers in a group that are already willing to vaccinate, and then if you can use these peers to, you know, to transmit information on vaccination, I think that would be much more effective than a healthcare worker or scientist saying that the vaccines are safe and effective, you know. So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope there that is not much explored yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So we have somebody else with their hand up. I'll just ask you to unmute.
Yeah, it was a really nice talk. Thank you very much, first of all. I was thinking, you know, from Turkey data, I wanted to ask, first of all, if you collected data also, if you asked the participants about their education more than undergrad, like master's or, you know, PhD, like was there a difference between undergrad and higher education?
Yeah, so we did ask. So we had 3 categories in that respect. So we had people who didn't have undergraduate degrees, people who had an undergraduate degree, and people who had postgraduate, so like master's or PhD degrees. And for vaccination uptake, we found that there was a significant difference between people who had undergrad degree and who don't have an undergrad degree. So people who were less educated were more willing to get vaccinated. And then we didn't find a significant difference between people who had postgraduate degrees and people who didn't have a bachelor degree, but still the direction was reversed. So it suggests that it's kind of counterintuitive, but actually some other research, previous research on vaccine hesitancy in Turkey also found that more educated people are more vaccine hesitant, especially educated young mothers. One reason may be that these people are more exposed to, they're more likely to look for information online on vaccinations, and at the moment, there is a lot of misinformation online on especially childhood vaccinations. So we think that that may be one reason why more educated people are being more hesitant about vaccinations in Turkey.
I was also thinking that maybe since more educated people are more aware towards governmental announcements and how, you know, it can be deceiving. I don't know about UK, to be honest, but at least in Turkey, the numbers are not really that much trusted, as you might know. So maybe educated people are more aware of that, and that's why they know that, you know, Chinese vaccine isn't that maybe effective and so on. I was just thinking.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't have time to talk about different vaccination programs in the UK and in Turkey. So in Turkey, the government's purchased a vaccine that is being developed in China, and actually Turkey is part of phase 3 trials of this vaccine. And the trials hasn't finished yet, but the government has decided to go ahead with the vaccinations. So this, of course, raised a lot of suspicion among the public. So you're right, that may be one reason, and we are, of course, we are going to incorporate this in our research, like different attitudes for different vaccines coming from different countries as well.
And I have one more little question as well. Like, what do you think about disgust sensitivity in general? Like, can you give me maybe more examples about it? I was thinking more anxious people were also more pro-vaccine, just because, you know, their disgust sensitivity and disease avoidance are more right now aware of the COVID. I was thinking of that, but I want to hear your opinion, James.
Yeah, very good question. So previous research already showed that people who score higher on disgust sensitivity are more reluctant about vaccinations, and especially women, because women in general score higher than men in disgust sensitivity. So yeah, I would expect if we were to ask questions about disgust sensitivity, in our surveys, we would probably find that it correlates with vaccine hesitancy. On the other hand, I think anxiety is different in that if you're more anxious about catching the virus, then you would be more risk avoidant, right? So vaccinations is also part of risk avoidance behavior. By getting vaccinations, you think that you're going to avoid that disease risk. So I think that's why more anxious people, people who are more anxious about catching the virus or passing it on to other people, more likely to accept COVID-19 vaccination.
But that's only individualistic personal choices, right? Like does it affect their judgments on others or how they think of other anti or pro vaccinators, you know? Do you have any?
Yeah, we don't know, like, we haven't looked at the correlates of anxiety and I don't know, outgroup mistrust, or like what they believe on others' opinions. But yeah, I think in general, also like this, you could predict that from evolutionary perspective on anxiety, that if you're more anxious, you're going to be more risk avoidant. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So we've got one more hand up. James, do you want to ask your question?
Cheers, Dr. Salali. That was great. I'm doing my dissertation on something similar, so it's dead interesting. I was just wondering, would you like to look into like countries that have urbanized really rapidly, like China and India, and see when you were comparing the difference between towns and forest camps and how medicine survived and like things like that?
Can you repeat the last part of your question? I couldn't understand that.
Sorry, I've got a thick accent. Would you like to look at like countries that have urbanized rapidly, like China and India, and like see if Joe, when you were talking about the differences between towns and forest camps, and see you know what it's like over there?
Yeah, it would be really interesting, I think, to look at like the effects of rapid development in medicinal plants or traditional treatment practices, especially in countries like India and China, where traditional medicinal practices are really like, you know, like the commonplace. I'm not considering doing it myself, but I'm sure there is a lot of other researchers who have been working in these countries already looking at this. I guess there should be, I'm imagining, yeah. But I'm interested in, as I said, I'm interested in cross-cultural comparisons. So of course, as a researcher, I can't do everything myself, but you know, I'm interested in collaborating with people who are doing similar work in other countries and to get comparable data to see population level differences as well, or similarities. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, cheers, thanks.
Okay, we'll go to some questions from the chat. So Ria, I think that's how you say your name. Does the extent of plant knowledge depend on people's gender? If foraging is mostly a female activity, I would expect a stronger maternal transmission relative to paternal transmission of knowledge within the family.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We saw that there are some more gendered plant uses, especially with regards to like genitourinary things. Like, for example, only women said that they use some plants to facilitate childbirth, or the same plant was also used for abortion. I guess it may be contributing to uterine constructions. And there were some plants that man used for more like uses that concerned male like the origin diseases. But apart from that, in terms of like foraging, what we found is that foraging related knowledge was shared among more largely among people residing in the same campsite rather than like within families. And I think this is because this is more like an open knowledge, like because when you go foraging, especially women, they go in groups. So there is more consensus on what plant is used for what foraging. Like, as I said, there are some plants that were used to poison fish, and there are some others that are used to poison monkey. So almost everyone in that campsite know that particular plant, and they use it for the same purpose. Whereas there's much more diversity on medicinal plant uses because it's more transmitted within families.
Yeah. Okay. Next question from Penny. Does shared medicinal knowledge between spouses relate to shared infant care, i.e. not necessarily the same pattern in other hunter-gatherer societies in cases where males are less involved in infant care?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And that was actually basis of my British Academy Fellowship, that looking at how cooperative child caring affects knowledge sharing patterns. I do really believe that cooperative care of children that we observe in traditional communities like hunter-gatherers, it's not only mothers that do the most child care, but for example, in Congo, we saw that siblings are the most important allo caregivers. So after mothers, siblings play a large role in childcare. So I think it's a very good medium. It's an important medium in facilitating knowledge transmission, childcare, and also children learn through childcare. So if you're sick and you see what your family is using, what plant your family is using, and that's how you learn about plants as well when you're getting the care from your caregivers. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Daniel. Does cultural fitness equate to meme selection?
That's a very good question. It's quite a deep question. Yeah, you can. Dawkins, in his book Selfish Gene, he came up with the idea of memes, where he said that, yeah, it like genes, ideas are also transmitted from person to person and also subject to selection. So in that case, yes, it is like that. That if an idea is more successful, that means that it's spread in the population more than another idea, like anti-vaccination beliefs, for example, that we're seeing that at the moment, especially in certain groups, they are more successful. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question from Gabrielle. Do grandmothers have a relevant role in this transmission of knowledge about medicinal plant use?
Do grandmothers have a relevant role in this transmission of knowledge about medicinal plant use? Yeah, I mean, what we found is that family ties, people who have like family relationships are important. Like they do share a lot of medicinal plant knowledge. We didn't look at grandmother child diets because of the reason that I told earlier. It was all adult populations, and it's the age thing that we only had like adult child and their mom. But I'm guessing that grandmothers also, if they are present, and if they involve in childcare, but which we see that from our child rearing data, grandmothers are also important allo carers, but not as much as siblings, for example, which suggests that they also do have some role in medicinal plant transmission. But maybe siblings would be more, it's a good question. We haven't checked it quantitatively. Yeah.
Okay, we have a final question from Hernando. Have you looked at the dynamics of transmission of vaccine hesitancy? Who influences whom?
Yeah, not yet. So this is this is kind of our ongoing project. We want to look at, because that was a survey study. It was almost like a really preliminary study that we did. And we found that there is a link between virus origin beliefs, which kind of supported the conspiratorial worldview, the association between conspiratorial worldview and vaccine hesitancy. But then we haven't yet looked at how these the information is transmitted. So now with I wanted to do more qualitative interviews because I really want to have a more in-depth understanding of vaccine hesitancy. And in those qualitative interviews, we are going to ask people where they get information about vaccinations. And I know in Turkey, there's lots of videos circulating in WhatsApp groups. My mom sends me them as she receives from people, but of course, we're going to look at it more in a more systematic way now.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions. So thank you very much, Denise, for the great talk and the question and answer session. And thank you everybody for coming along today. The recording will be up on our YouTube channel later today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Yes.
It was a pleasure.